Hi, my name is Whitney, and I wrote my paper on how bringing critical theory to the field of strategic communication would benefit communicators. Here, I've included some key terms that I reference heavily throughout my essay, the first, of course, being strategic communication. I've relied on the perspective of Hallahan and authors to give a simple definition here that's sufficient for the goals of my thesis. The second key term that I cover is critical theory. Critical theory is an umbrella term for a variety of frameworks that challenge society's power structures. Some of these frameworks include feminism, gender theory, and critical race theory, so you guys might be a little familiar with some of those. Lastly, ideology is a concept in critical theory that refers to the distorted view of reality that we all have due to the power structures that surround us. So, ideology is kind of similar to cultural beliefs and assumptions, and it is anchored deeply within our society. So, some of the potential positive outcomes of the integration of these fields would be giving communicators the ability to create more deliberate messaging, avoid crisis situations, position their organizations favorably within the dominant ideology, as well as position themselves more favorably within an organization. And we'll go over all of these in more detail in a moment. First, language is a key aspect of communication. So the first thing I did in my paper was conduct a review of literature regarding language through the lens of critical theory. In the late 1800s, Friedrich Nietzsche really laid a lot of groundwork for critical theory, and he asserted that language is, one, socially constructed, so it's a tool that people have created with one another to try and transmit meaning to each other. Two, the words that we use are not inherently meaningful. Rather, they're symbols of larger concepts that cannot be accurately depicted by the words themselves. Decades later, Michel Foucault built upon Nietzsche's idea, proposing that if language is socially constructed, then all of the power structures that exist in society also run through language itself. More recently, cultural analyst Slavoj Žižek furthered these ideas by asserting that language is a vehicle for the maintenance of ideology. Therefore, the power structures that exist in our society are perpetuated by the structure of our language. Lastly, I review work by philosopher Thomas Kuhn. If you've heard of terms like paradigm and paradigm shift, these phrases largely come from him. He defines paradigm shift as a change in the methodologies and accepted knowledge in a scientific discipline. I use this idea of a paradigm shift to equate paradigms and ideologies. As such, ideologies change with time just like paradigms do. So when we converge all of this literature, we understand that language is a socially constructed tool that is perpetuated and formed by ideology. And as a vehicle of ideology, language sustains the cultural assumptions and power structures of a society. So now we can start to put critical theory into practice. A great example of how an organization has used these concepts to position itself favorably is the Coca-Cola Company. Going back to Nietzsche, we can see how Coke has used the metaphorical space connected to our language to assert its own product as it, or the real thing. Zizek talked about this strategy in a film called The Pervert's Guide to Ideology, asking, what is that it, the real thing? We are not talking about objective, factual properties of Coke. We are talking only here about that elusive surplus. So the Coca-Cola Company positions itself within the dominant ideology to pitch itself as the true object of desire for consumers, the it that individuals crave. It's not just making a case to consumers that this is the product they would like. It's created a role for itself in our ideological framework that tells people that if they want the real thing, then the only option is Coke. And now Coca-Cola is not just selling a commodity, it's selling an experience and a desire. Beyond this, the Coca-Cola Company played well into the dominant ideology with its Hilltop commercial in 1971. At this time, much of America was growing tired of the ongoing Vietnam War, and ideas of peace and harmony were circulating in the cultural paradigm as a result of the hippie movement. The Coca-Cola Company created an advertisement with a jingle featuring lyrics that mention ideas of peace like perfect harmony and white turtle doves. While the song was empty of any actual political meaning, the ad was a huge success. The Coca-Cola Company received thousands of letters of praise from stakeholders, and the song was playing from radio stations all around the country. This all resulted from Coke truly understanding the cultural paradigm and ideological values of society at the time. In contrast, Pepsi released an advertisement in the same vein as the Coca-Cola Hilltop commercial in 2017. It featured crowds of young people with messaging that was empty of political action, but evoked unity and harmony. Like the Coke ad, Pepsi's campaign was released during a tense moment in U.S. culture. This was after a contentious election cycle and during significant protest movements. However, audience response to this ad was vastly different. A huge backlash to the ad occurred, and Pepsi decided to retract the ad just a day after its release, resulting in bad press and millions of dollars in losses. The difference in reaction to the two ads is that an ideological paradigm shift had occurred, and Pepsi did not recognize this ahead of time. The culture of the US in 2017 was no longer enchanted by ideas like peace and love and harmony anymore. Now, these vague messages of unity came across as insensitive or unrealistic, even though Pepsi was using many of the same words and images as Coke did in 1971. Communicators familiar with critical theory would have brought a more informed analytic eye to the Pepsi ad, since they would have had a better understanding of how these symbols are interpreted by diverse audiences under different ideological paradigms. This shows how critical theory can help communicators avoid crisis. I also briefly included some additional functions of critical theory in practice. First of all, communicators who strive to work against the power systems that underlie our dominant ideology can use critical theory to push against it. Also, individuals and marginalized groups can do the same thing on an individual level. For example, Hallahan and authors note in their article that academics who focus on gender studies can understand how women can use language strategically to reach their goals in a male-privileged work environment. Lastly, communicators who are concerned about the ethics of their practice can use an understanding of power systems to evaluate the moral implications of their work. If you'd like to look further into any of the citations that I referenced, they are listed here. Thanks so much for watching my presentation. If you have any questions, let me know in the discussion post below, and I'll look forward to replying to those. I also look forward to watching your guys' presentations. Thanks.